Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's C-O-M-B-E-S-T, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?
I'm Egbert, the owner of this station. Check out my website at egbert.com. That's E-G-G-B-U-R-T, egbert.com. Now it's back to Brad and John. Check out their website at bjshow.co. The BJ Show? Come on, guys. Anyway, here's B and J.
I still don't understand why he has a problem with our name of our show. It just doesn't make any sense. You're Brad, and I'm John. Hold it. I got that backwards, didn't I?
It's one or the other. You know, speaking of commercials, Brad, you know what I love about the Echo Cat commercials that folks who are listening to the live stream here, if you listen to the podcast, you don't hear them. If you listen to the live stream, you do.
Lightning round for the last part of the show. Okay, Eric Schmidt was on TV quite a bit, national TV the last couple of days in national news, and John knows why. He's your buddy. Tell everybody why he's been the center of attention.
So first of all, I don't claim friendship with anyone because any relationships I have outside of the show, I pretend that they don't exist. The only thing that matters is this show. Well, if you go to johncombest.com today, you'll see a clip from Fox News talking a little bit about the censorship case, big government and big tech colluding to suppress certain voices about COVID. Are those the stories you're talking about, Brad?
Yes. Now, explain that case, because that
Sure.
once again came out of Missouri. And wasn't it the AG of Missouri, and I believe, wasn't it Louisiana as well,
It was
too?
Louisiana as well. Excuse me. In general, the idea is that big government, a.k.a. the Biden administration, was colluding with social media companies, namely Facebook or Meta today, and a pre-Elon Musk Twitter, or before Elon purchased it. And the idea was that the administration was working with Facebook to suppress voices and ideas that were critical of the Biden administration's position on COVID lockdowns, the fact that this disease was created in a Wuhan lab and escaped. Those type of things and those ideas were being suppressed by the White House using big tech as their Eric Schmidt describes it as outsourcing censorship. So the idea is, can the government, Eric Schmidt would say, the question is, can the government act in collusion with big tech companies to suppress Americans' right to free speech?
Now, the reason that Eric Schmidt is being interviewed about this is because he instituted this when he was still the AG of Missouri.
Correct. Even a year ago, Attorney General Schmidt was still the Attorney General before he was elected to the Senate. Yeah.
Right. Now, is Andrew Bailey, the current Attorney General, is he in charge of this case now?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's a good lead into the fact that Attorney General Bailey was on Pete Mundo's show in Kansas City yesterday talking about exactly this. And Bailey's point was that he took Schmidt's case. Schmidt laid the groundwork for it. And Bailey explains that he added a few other nuances to the case that's being argued as we speak before the Supreme Court.
Interesting. And, once again, the interesting part of this is a very complicated issue because of the fact that it has to do with First Amendment. And matter of fact, I think it was in the news just the other day, there was an interesting comment by one of the Supreme Court justices, if you know who I'm talking about, who essentially said a comment that everybody went, what did she say?
Is this the Jumanji lady?
Yes. Where
Jumanji had said something about this.
Where essentially she made some comment about, sometimes the First Amendment gets in the way in the government or something like that. You're going like, well, guess what? That's why the First Amendment's there.
Yeah, there's been a lot of discussion about that. And even some libertarian type folks defending Jumanji's position on this.
Really?
Yeah. So I didn't click on the link yesterday, but I saw I forgot who it was had written a piece that said, well, her argument isn't as bad as a 10-second clip makes it sound. I didn't click on it. I'm uninformed about that.
The interesting thing about this is, yesterday, the news was, and this is if you don't watch the news cycles, you miss things like in literally hours. And I say literally, matter of fact, someone chastised me because they said I sound like I'm like a Gen Xer when I say, well, literally.
Literally.
Okay. Anyway, the Supreme Court came down and said that the new Texas law that allows Texas to arrest immigrants and essentially deport them or throw them in jail was okay. And then 3 hours later, a federal Court came out and said, no, we don't agree with the Supreme Court. And I'm thinking to myself, well, I thought there was a reason the Supreme Court was called the Supreme Court. Once the Supreme Court said, this is what we think, that you have to bow and kiss their feet, apparently not the case. Now, explain.
Yeah, and I just saw a headline about this on Twitter that appeals court late Tuesday blocked the state from enforcing its immigration law.
Okay, explain that to me. How can the state get the nod from the Supreme Court that yes, this law is okay as far as we're concerned, and then a federal court comes along and says, nope, you can't do that. We don't care what the Supreme Court says.
I don't know the nuance of that, Brad.
I'm going like, okay.
And I mean, but here's the thing: it's like watching a tennis match. So there'll be another volley this morning.
Right. It'll go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the crazy thing about it is, if you look at, and once again, I'm not trying to say, like, well, the federal government's got a right because of the Constitution. I got to dig I can't find it. I lost it here in the studio. I got stuff thrown everywhere because I'm doing some work in here. I can't find my pocket Constitution book, but I remember
did you look in your pocket?
It's not in my pocket.
Did you check your pocket?
It's not in my pocket.
Okay.
There's something in the and the defenders have said this. Defenders of what Texas have pointed this out. The Constitution essentially says that it's the job of the federal government to essentially, things like defense and borders and things like that, unless the federal government does not act in accordance with protection of the states, and then the states have the right essentially to protect themselves, which is,
That's right. Yeah, and that's the whole argument.
If you understand the whole thing, you go back to our founding fathers, and once again, the interesting thing on this is that we were the Revolutionary War of 1776. The Constitution, if I'm not mistaken, was ratified in 1789. Do the math, 13 years. So 13 years after we had the Revolutionary War, there was no Constitution. And if you know your history as well, when they put Washington in as president, there were a lot of people that wanted to call him the king because, once again, most of the people who were in the United States at that time, our founding fathers, were people who came from England, and they were used to deal with the fact they had a king. Well, anyway, the whole thing, it just gets so complicated, and it's gotten to the point where sometimes you read these things, you go like, oh my God, the lawyers are just screwing everything up, and
I do. And so for anybody who doesn't know who's listening, when Brad says founding fathers, he means slave owners. And Brad came up in the era where we talked about founding fathers with reverence. But let's be clear, he's talking about slave owners. And you can learn more about this at Corey Bush University, which is right there on the corner it's right at Brookings Drive.
Well, isn't she the president of the 1619 Institute or whatever it is now?
Yeah, well, they wanted to hire her, Brad. But there was this privileged white man who said that if you lead a nonprofit, you should take less than market value for salary. And people like me, Johnny Comfortable Shoes, stood up and said, how unfair to BIPOCs. How unfair that this man is flexing his white privilege.
So that's me. I'm the rich guy who's flexing my white privilege.
You are Brad White Privilege Hildebrand.
I'm the guy who drives a car right now that has to keep a gallon of antifreeze in the trunk because my radiator has a hole in it and I lose about a half gallon a day. I'm the guy who's driving a car that has 285,000 miles on it. I'm the guy who cuts his own grass.
And by the way, we're getting to that time of year, Brad, where you might want to. I don't mean to derail us from immigration talks here, but you might want to give people a helpful primer on the correct length at which to keep your grass, because this is an issue for which you and I are aligned.
For those of you knuckleheads out there who set your lawnmower at 1 inch or 2 inch, if you talk to the lawn care professionals, and all you have to do is go to a place like a corporate headquarters or something like that is professionally maintained, you will notice the grass is not cut short, it's cut long to the point where, and depending upon the time of the year, especially in Missouri, with what we have with the heat and everything in the summer, you want to have your grass cut in the heart of the summer at 3.5 to 4 inches. And people go,
and why is that, Brad?
Because of the fact that there's more grass, there's more blade of the grass exposed, which will get the sun and essentially grow the plant, the grass quicker, get better root system. B, when you have a nice carpet of grass, it essentially shields the ground from the sunlight and essentially does not dry out the soil. And not only that, here's the other crazy thing: you should never cut more than a third of the length of the blade of grass at any point in time.
Yes.
So once this comes to the point where, matter of fact, there's a running joke that, like, if you live in South City, I mean, I don't know if this is true or not, the South City that the guys cut their grass at an inch, and once again, I've had this discussion with people before, and they'll go like, well, why do you cut your grass if you cut it at 4 inches? Matter of fact, the one I won't say. I cut more than one lawn. Matter of fact, I cut the crap transmitter side. Now that's a little bit different because I cut the crap transmitter side as high as the lawnmower go, 5.5 inches. I cut the crap transmitter side at 5.5 inches, and mainly because of the fact that it's easier to cut that way, and a bunch of different other reasons. But once again, it's this goofy thing if you talk to anybody who's into lawn care here in the St. Louis area, we're in what's called a transition zone. There's what they call cool season grasses and warm season grasses, and we're like sort of right in the middle because
a mix. Yeah, we're a mix, right?
Right. We get the 100+ temperatures, and then we get the 10 degree or the 0 degree temperatures. We're not like someplace like up in Minneapolis where the highest temperature for the entire year may be like
Florida or somewhere that needs a zoysia grass.
Right, exactly. And there's the warm season grasses are typically the zoysias and things like that. To the point where you go into Florida, if you go to Disney World, I remember going to Disney World one year over Christmas, and the guys are cutting the grass at Disney World. And I'm thinking to myself, isn't this interesting?
Yeah. Now, so that's honestly, Brad, that's my number 2 pet peeve is when people scalp their lawn. My number 1 landscape, and I'm not a landscaping expert, but I know enough to have conversations about this. You know what my number 1 pet peeve is, Brad?
My front lawn.
Not your front lawn. I am not your neighbor. Therefore, I'm not complaining about it. My number 1 complaint and pet peeve are mulch volcanoes around trees.
Well, but see, and I know what you're saying. In other words, the idea being is that you over mulch it around trees, and
that you make it a huge volcano shape because you know why guys do that? Because everybody else in their neighborhood does it, so they think it's the right way to do it.
Right.
Level out your mulch.
Right. You don't want to have that because there's a bunch of different reasons it actually hurts the tree.
Exactly.
And not only that, you don't want to have your mulch too thick. There's a whole science, but
it's just a great example of guys, and yes, I'm saying guys see other guys do it and they say, that looks cool. That's how you mulch a tree. There's no excuse in 2024 for basic things like landscaping to get stuff like that wrong. If it was 1984 and you had to go to the library and get a Scott's lawn care manual and sit down and read it, there's an excuse for not knowing this stuff. But there's no excuse today.
Well, what I also find fascinating on many fronts, and I'm the kind of guy that I'm fascinated by all sorts of different kinds of businesses. I mean, tons of different kind of businesses. And what you find is once you get into some of these different areas, like, for example, we talk about lawn care again. I am a member, and I will proud to say this, I'm a member of a group on Facebook about a bunch of guys, talking about how to properly maintain your lawn equipment, okay?
Oh,
and
wow.
We're not talking your 21-inch Huffy mowers. We're talking like your commercial grade, like the Skag and the Ferris kind of equipment, stuff like that. But what's interesting about it is you see all these little nuances that they do that the average person would never, ever, ever think about doing, and that makes the difference between.
What's a good one? I'm sorry to interrupt, but what's a good example?
Blade sharpens all the time. Matter of fact, there's a lot of these the big lawn care companies. They sharpen the blades sometimes more than once a week, at least once a week. Now, once again, these guys may be cutting 40, 50, 60 hours a week, whereas, if you're a homeowner, the chances of you putting 40 hours on your lawnmower in 1 year is probably, if you have a small lawn, maybe you do 40 hours. But constantly sharpening the blades because of the fact that if you have a dull blade, instead of slicing the blade of grass, it sort of mauls the blade of grass.
It rips it.
It rips the blade of grass, which is not good for the blade of grass.
How often do you sharpen your blade?
Well, see, I'm not cutting that much, but I mean, I'll usually do it a couple times a year. And typically, like a couple of my lawnmowers, my commercial lawnmowers that I have, like my big 61-inch, cut 0 turns, I have one of them. I've got 3 sets of blades. So in other words, I've got one set of blade that's on there right now, and I'll keep.
And you can just swap them out.
I just swap them out. So when I take, I have the other ones that are sharp already. I sharpen them. Matter of fact, once again, there's a whole science to blade sharpening. There's a machine that some of these guys use that literally costs like $6,000. But what it does is it puts a perfect edge, and there's a whole science about this at the degree of the edge you put on the blade. I mean, once again, this is by guys who've done this for a long time, and this is by guys that if you take a look at the lawns that they cut, it's just absolutely positively beautiful. And, and once again, there's a whole science behind this. And, to the point where most people, they don't even, they have no idea. They get there. And I'm not making fun of it. They buy their lawnmower at Sears, when the other day is Sears now, at Walmart, and, you get one or maybe two seasons out of it, and the engine blows up, and you buy another one.
I'm taking, it's spring break. I'm taking the kids to Walmart today, Brad. You know what? I'm going to be in the lawn aisle, and I'm going to pick up a blade sharpener. I'm on Amazon right now looking at them. I bet Walmart has them.
John.
I'm serious.
Are you really?
Oh, yeah, I'm dead serious. I got a new lawnmower last year, and I used it all season, Brad, and I didn't sharpen the blade.
Well, you also need to get a blade balancer. Do you know about that as well, too?
Oh, Brad, add it to the list. Maybe that needs to be segment B for tomorrow's show.
You need to get a blade balancer. If you're going to sharpen your blades, you need the proper thing to grind the edge on it. Then after that, you need to balance it, because if you have an unbalanced blade, that's not good for your engine.
Brad, I've been looking for a good grind session for a long time, Brad.
Am I a nerd or what?
Hey, you know what? I am not the sharpest blade in Brad's garage, but I'm here with them 5 days a week.
Yes, well, I appreciate that. Okay, we're out of here. Talk to you tomorrow, John.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?